You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 15th of October 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Tom Edwards. Coming up on today's programme, Trump and Milei upstaged the IMF. Our Chris Chermak is here to tell us more. Chris?
Yeah, it's interesting, Tom, that Trump has chosen to meet the Argentine president and bail out the country in a week where the IMF, which normally bails countries out, is holding its annual meetings in Washington.
More from Chris on that in just a moment. Also ahead, we'll be hearing from a malt master responsible for one of the world's finest whiskies. And later, I'll be joined by Monocle's Laura Kramer. But Laura, why have you got your coat on? The show's about to start.
Tom, I'm off to an important event. Hello Kitty will be there, so I have to dash out the studio to meet Kitty-san as we speak.
OK, we better let you run. We'll hear more from Laura about that later. We'll also have the latest business from the Bloomberg newsroom and the global headlines too, all ahead here on The Briefing with me, Tom Edwards. Thank you for being with us on today's programme. Lots to get through, so let's get started with the world's financial leaders descending on Washington this week, as well as at least one world leader in Argentina's Javier Milei. I'm joined now for more on this by Monocle senior news editor Chris Chermak. Hi Chris, how are you?
Good afternoon, Tom. Good to be here.
Lots going on. Now, you've trailed ahead a moment ago. Let's start with the IMF World Bank meetings. First of all, before we talk about who's there and who's stealing the thunder, give us what's the skinny on these annual meetings, first of all? Remind us.
So I have to say, in a previous life, Tom, although actually also for Monocle when I was Washington correspondent, I've attended these meetings way too many times actually to count over in Washington. And it's kind of like an annual temperature check on the state of the world economy. That's basically what it's about, the state of the world economy and the state of cooperation in the world economy, because all of these finance ministers descend on Washington for meetings. And both, to be fair, right now are not doing so well, are they, Tom? I mean, the economic growth, not too great. The IMF released its big sort of report this week, the World Economic Outlook. Growth is a little bit better than it said back in April, but still not very good, just over 3% around the world, 1.5% only in the wealthier nations like where we are, 4% for developing countries. And the IMF's managing director, Kristalina Georgieva, said uncertainty is the new normal. That was her line, if you will, coming into these meetings. And so finance ministers are going to come into this environment, right? They're going to be discussing the state of global cooperation, which is also uncertain right now. Everyone's kind of hunkering down, doing their own thing, protecting their own economies, trying to please Trump at the same time. That's what it's all about.
We'll come to him in a second, but that uncertainty point is interesting, isn't it? Because I guess depending on how you look at it, it's a bit of a glass half full, glass half empty. Racked with uncertainty, a world subject to so much volatility, these meetings either matter a lot more or a lot less. It's funny, isn't it, in a way?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they matter because you want countries to get together and actually figure out how to jumpstart their economies a little bit. But there's a lot of pessimism out there at the moment when it comes to what they're actually going to do. And a big reason for that is, of course, tariffs.
Well, let's talk about tariffs. Now, as I understand, my limited understanding, Chris, the IMF says tariffs so far, it hasn't impacted the global economy quite so much as expected or as feared in certain quarters. But of course, with the caveat, it could change, and the Sino-US tensions over trade and tariffs specifically could yet have a much graver impact. Again, it's a sort of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but I don't know, what did you make of those pronouncements?
Well, it is, and that's what's interesting, because that's really what led this change at the IMF, that they said growth is a little bit better than what they predicted back in April, because April was the height of all of this uncertainty, if you will. Donald Trump just announcing, having his sort of Freedom Day and talk of tariffs. Now we get to this stage 6 months later, and things are not quite as bad as expected. There were some trade deals that Donald Trump has reached, and so that's what the IMF is responding to. And so this is really all about Donald Trump. It's about politics. The IMF says, well, so far the tariffs haven't been as high as we expected. But right in this week, as the IMF is meeting, of course, we've had the same news, that same thing over again with Donald Trump last Friday threatening additional tariffs on China. markets go plunging. Then on Monday, he comes out and says, well, I'd like to work with China. I'd like to help China out. So we've seen a kind of microcosm right ahead of these meetings of exactly what the IMF is worried about, right? They're worried. They say, well, things aren't as bad as we thought. Tariffs are not as high as we expected. But we're going into a week where, Trump has threatened 100% tariffs on China again. That could send the global economy and markets back into a tailspin if he ever actually follows through.
Well, this is the point, I guess. Second-guessing Trump remains as challenging as ever. Let's talk about Milei. We mentioned him at the top as well. Bailout from the US. Trump, in a way, is sort of upstaging the IMF. He's getting involved in policy and direction of travel that really what we have come to expect was their remit. Knowingly, unhelpfully, helpfully, he's not bothered. What do you think?
It's so interesting that Donald Trump, I have to say, is taking this role because the International Monetary Fund is the one that bails out countries, and it has this whole legacy with Argentina itself, right? It's quite unpopular in Argentina for the role that it's played in the past because normally what the IMF does is they bail out a country and then they attach a whole load of conditions to it for this is our way for you to fix your economy in order to get this money. This time around, Donald Trump is the one stepping in instead, and he's not attaching any conditions to this because he's basically bailing out a friend, right? He loves Javier Milei. They had this meeting in Washington, and Trump even leaned into the friendship and the political leanings by saying if there is a condition, he didn't put the condition on Milei, he put the condition on the Argentine people because there are midterms coming up in Argentina at the end of this month, and he basically said, if you don't support Milei, I'm going to pull the funding. He's given Argentina $20 billion in a currency swap. This is basically Argentina needs dollars. They've pegged their own currency to the dollar to try and help inflation, to try and cut down inflation in their country, stabilize the currency. But investors don't trust that. So they've been buying up a whole bunch of dollars. Here you have the U.S. stepping in saying, we'll give you dollars, but if investors still don't trust that Trump is going to carry through, it wouldn't be enough. Even that $20 billion could evaporate pretty quickly. So it's this weird game of chicken and egg, confidence in the Argentine economy and in its politics. Investors kind of want Milei to continue, but they're also worried that he won't. And now the U.S. is stepping in, but also only conditionally if the Argentine people continue to support Milei.
Make of that what you will, listeners. And it's funny, if we come back to the event itself, you mentioned you'd covered it before as a journalist, of course, Chris, and it's often, these meetings, the bilaterals that happen on the margins at events like this that are more interesting, where often more substantive policy momentum is gathered. Trump and Milei, they just hit it off. Trump likes his style. He's the chainsaw wielder, blah, blah, blah. What should we be looking out for? Because sometimes these meetings on the margins happen quite almost transparently. Journos, hacks like yourself, actually watching these conversations happen. Who needs to talk to each other? Who will be talking to each other? Do you think that actually it might not be from official pronouncements, but something that's actually hashed out on the margins that might be more consequential, Chris, this time?
I mean, there's always lots of interesting things that can happen on the margins. Obviously, the U.S. and China are such a key to the global relationship. So obviously, the U.S. Secretary for the Treasury will be there along with Chinese officials. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any progress on that. When it comes to Argentina, I just found it interesting because they kind of took that away from the IMF. It was meeting at the White House, obviously, with Milei. So that's something that's happening separately. But yes, the IMF and World Bank meetings, they have their own buildings and headquarters in Washington. That's where all these finance ministers will be. There will be a lot of conversations going around that. On the one hand, on trade and tariffs. A lot of finance ministers will be hoping to get some time still with Scott Bessent to discuss tariffs going forward. And the other topic that's going on is actually debt forgiveness. So that's another one for developing countries. That's what they'll be looking for when it comes to this. There's a lot of talk of debt. Everyone is in debt. Every country in the world right now is in debt. But developing countries are looking for some debt forgiveness in order to free them up to spend a bit more cash going forward to kind of revive their own economies. So that's going to be their priority, kind of looking for finance ministers in the wealthier nations who might be willing to carry through a promise that the G20 did actually make to forgive some debt for the developing world.
Chris, fascinating stuff. We'll be keeping a close eye on events and pronouncements out of DC in the days ahead. That's Monocle's Chris Chermak making sense of that one for you. Plenty going on around the world. Let's cross over to Monocle's Monica Lillis, who's standing by with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Tom. Hamas has handed over 4 more bodies to the Red Cross, bringing the number of the released deceased captives to 8. 3 of the dead have been formally identified by Israel, while the IDF say the 4th does not match any recorded captive. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's government will reportedly proceed with opening the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt, allowing the transfer of humanitarian aid into the Strip. China has increased the maximum hiring age from 35 to 38 for some civil service positions for the first time in 3 decades. The move aims to keep older workers in the labour force longer and to bolster the nation's shrinking working population. Fashion giant LVMH's shares opened up 12% on Wednesday, a day after the group reported better than expected sales in the third quarter. This is mainly as a result of encouraging demand from China. Analysts say the overall environment is positive enough to expect a better luxury reporting season. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much indeed, Monica. We'll have the latest headlines for you at the top of the next hour, just after 1300 here in London. This is the briefing on Monocle Radio. Let's cross over to our friends at Bloomberg's newsroom now. Reporter Ewan Potts is standing by. Good afternoon, Ewan. How are you today?
Hi, Tom. I'm very well, thank you.
Jolly good. Now, listen, we were talking about China with our Chris Chermak a moment ago. Let's zoom in, though, on inflation data out of China. I know we've learned more today. What are we seeing? What are we hearing? And how does it compare with the rest of the world, Ewan?
Tom, while consumers in the West battling the cost of living should probably switch off for a couple of minutes, consumer prices in China are 0.3% lower than a year ago, mostly driven by falling food prices, something else which is rather unfamiliar to most of us. The picture for producers is even more bleak/happy, depending on your perspective. Factory gate prices are 2.3% lower than a year ago. Producer prices have in fact fallen every single month now for 3 full years. It's actually the country's longest streak of economy-wide price declines since China's market reforms back in the late 1970s. Now, for those happily dreaming of a world of falling prices, at an economy-wide level, it is actually quite a problem. Entrenched deflation leads to customers putting off purchases. Why would you buy now if it's going to be cheaper in a couple of months' time? And the core issue in China is massive overcapacity in some industries, leading to a glut of production. And that means firms are forced to cut prices to survive. It's a problem that the government is well aware of. Beijing's been stepping up efforts to curb what it calls disorderly competition. But thus far, factory gate prices just keep on falling.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary. As you say, the difference is so stark. Ewan, let's change gears. I wanted to ask about this because I actually put a program together this week about the shiny metal, gold, breaching the $4,000 per troy ounce mark. We only published that show on Monday, and already we're up above 4,200. It's extraordinary. It just keeps on going. What is it driving the yellow metal higher and ever higher?
Yeah, I know you're a big holder of gold, Tom. Best to publish those stories without putting any numbers on it. As you say, it just keeps on going up above $4,200 today. It's actually up 57% year to date. It's been a phenomenal rally for the yellow metal. They're calling it the debasement trade. And it's not just gold that's been caught up with this, but also silver and platinum. The trade's named after the debasement of currencies. The worry amongst investors is that as countries issue more and more debt, the value of fiat currencies, the currencies we use every day, is going to start falling. So they don't have faith that dollars and pounds and euros will be worth what they are now in a couple of years' time. So gold is seen as a good haven asset. It's also something that people buy when there is uncertainty. And as we know, there is a lot of uncertainty around the world when it comes to trade, as well as many other issues. Fascinating to look at the picture with silver, actually. That hit an all-time high earlier yesterday, beating the record set in 1980. Silver is actually up by 78%, so actually outgunning gold. And there have even been reports of people booking transatlantic flights to shift silver bars from New York to London to arbitrage the price difference between the two cities. I'm sort of picturing a shady-looking guy with sunglasses with some silver bars next to him on the seat, but that's probably not how it works. So fascinating that the silver market is really being caught up in all of this as well, and big rises for platinum as well.
Well, yeah, and people are now saying, look, $5,000 market is already that's looming into view, and they're pointing to things like probable rate cuts from the Fed. These are pretty likely, right? 25 basis points, maybe one more in the autumn, maybe another as we get towards December. Is it that funny thing where actually this is just going to happen? We don't need to sort of speculate. That is the direction of travel. And can it hit 5,000 this year?
Well, it's not impossible. If you look at the chart, it's certainly it is ever upwards, but it's worth being a little bit cautious with gold. I mean, the first thing that any seasoned investor will tell you is that there is no yield, so nobody's going to pay you a dividend for holding gold. It just sort of sits there in bars or in your ETFs, not doing very much. So it's only really useful if the price keeps going up, and the price will keep going up for a while until it stops going up. And then the history of gold is that it starts to go down pretty damn quickly. So the chances are at some point it will fall, and it will fall precipitously. So it's a good store of value when it's going up, but that does not always go on forever. And as you say, things can change, and that is a problem if you're sitting on a load of gold paying you no dividend.
Indeed. Ewan, you talk such good sense as always. That's our good pal, Bloomberg reporter Ewan Potts, joining us here on The Briefing on Monocle Radio. 16 minutes past midday. One of the world's most expensive whiskies has been made available to the open market, exciting to connoisseurs and lay drinkers alike. The Scottish Glenfiddich distillery has made a rare whisky release, the Glenfiddich 48-year-old Lagonda single malt. And do you know who was one of the first to taste it? That's right, Monocle. And not only Monocle, Monocle's Tom Webb specifically. And he's here to tell me more about it. Tom, tell me more about it.
Well, interestingly, it does follow off well to what Ewan was saying. During uncertain times, a lot of people actually invest in the whiskey market, and this is one to grab if you can. There's only 50 bottles of it. It comes from a single barrel from 1976. It is a beautiful whiskey. It is in collaboration with Aston Martin because, as you may have seen from the fins on the Formula One cars, Glenfiddich is on there. And it's partnered because it's a heritage brand. It's got the racing green.
It's got the Lagonda name, of course.
It is
a celebrated name in motorsport.
Exactly. And this was a one-on-one tasting. I thought it was actually going to be a party, but it turned out it was me having a very, very rare dram of whiskey with the malt master for Glenfiddich, who's Brian Kinsman. Very serious man.
So he's serious about his craft, right? And tell me, what was it like? I've got to ask you. You're amongst the privileged few to get to knock back a wee bit of this.
I did knock back. They gave me a very generous dram. And after the hour, I had 2/3 of it left, to which I did knock back. I took it like a shot. I hadn't realised...
What did Brian make of that?
I didn't like it. He was wincing. I hadn't realised that I did just knock back a few £1,000s worth of whiskey. I did interview Brian, the man himself, to find out a little bit more, because I tasted it. I'm not a whiskey connoisseur, but he is. And this is a little bit more about the whiskey.
Yeah, so this is a 1976 Glenfiddich, so 48 years old when it went into the bottle. It's a really classic vintage Glenfiddich. It's been matured in European oak, and then quite uniquely, we've taken the whiskey about 18 months before we bottled it. We transferred it into a bespoke 100-litre sherry cask, a quarter butt, and that's just added more colour, more depth, more complexity, and a beautiful, beautiful flavour.
And you've been sitting on this for some time. Why now?
Why not? Yeah, there's always the question of when do you bottle whiskey, and you're just waiting on that opportunity. So an opportunity comes along in terms of a partnership, somebody's looking for a special bottle, and I'd instantly go to my archive in my head of which casks will work best for this particular opportunity.
Now, as the nose of the whiskey, how do you prepare yourself for work each day, and how do you keep on top of your game?
Basically try and minimise outside aroma. So I really only do nosing. If we're setting up samples for nosing, we'll do about 25 at a time. We're in a climate controlled room, no outside odours, got a nice filtration system on the air. Not a clean room by any means, but just nothing to really distract you. Personally then, unscented deodorants, don't drink coffee, try and avoid strong flavours, and it's all about just looking after your palate, looking after your nose, and then once you've done your 25, go off and do something else, refresh yourself, do some emails, have a cup of tea, go back in another 25 whiskies. So it's just about that consistency and And when you're in the room, that acts almost like a little bit of a calibration. So you know that everything in that room will be always to the same sort of environment.
Brian Kinsman, talking to you there, Tom. I wasn't expecting in his roster of how to do it properly, a bit of email and a brew.
He makes a lot of sacrifices, that man, because he has very bland food throughout the day. And then on Saturdays, he goes crazy and has a curry. But on Monday to Friday, it's just rice and pasta.
Oh, really? I don't know what the going rate is for either a dram or, frankly, a bottle of the 48-year-old Lagonda. Do you know that? And is it worth it, Tom, in your humble opinion?
I do know it, and I'm not sure I can tell you. I can tell you how much a 78-year-old single malt should retail at. We're looking north of £70,000, and I'm almost certain that is what these went for. They did go on the open market, as said, 50 bottles, along with Glenfiddich's exclusive library online. So that dram that I had, a couple of £1,000, was it worth it? It really was. All I can say...
It was very much worth it, says the man who did not pay for it.
It didn't burn. It was very pleasant. It went down very well. And it's supposed to have a hint of apple strudel with buttery dough. So it was sweet. It was very enjoyable.
Don't mind if I do. And lots of the finest things in life date from the late 1970s.
They do.
Can I just throw that out there? just mentioning for a friend. Tom Webb, lovely stuff. Thanks to Brian as well. Brian Kinsman up at Glenfiddich. You're listening to The Briefing. You are listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. I'm delighted to say we're joined now from not too far away, here in London, by Monocle's Laura Kramer. She's live at Japan House for, well, a very special event indeed. Laura, listen, we heard from you right at the top of the show, sprinting out of the building. You're like Usain Bolt. You hinted somebody important was in town. What's all this fuss about?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be rude, Tom. I couldn't resist because Hello Kitty herself is in London, and she's here for something truly special, the Grand Suno Tournament at the Royal Albert Hall. She's here to support the event, and I have to say, it's not every day you get to see a globally loved character teaming up with the national sport of Japan at the same time.
Well, yeah, look, this is a little bit of an odd couple, isn't it? Laura, I've seen a couple of the practitioners of sumo around town in their big kimono, knocking about over there and around sort of Knightsbridge. They're pretty spectacular. Hello Kitty, not necessarily the obvious bedfellow. Tell me how this unlikely relationship came about.
Well, you think so, but Sanrio, the Japanese lifestyle and entertainment company behind Hello Kitty, believes that it's got this philosophy of connecting people through culture and friendship, and they're sponsoring the event as a way to share Japanese traditions and with the UK audience. And, Hello Kitty herself is said to have been born in London, Tom, so obviously she's the perfect ambassador for this.
Yeah, do you know what? I didn't know that, Laura. So you learn a new thing every day. Now, the Grand Sumo is happening, of course, at the Royal Albert Hall, a spectacular venue at the best of times, let alone when it has the incredible sort of sumo arena and all the infrastructure installed. Tell me exactly what's the sort of plan for the week there? And have you yourself spotted any of the big fellas having a bit of a wander around South Ken?
Well, yes, indeed, I have. Yeah, the iconic venue, of course, that you mentioned, has indeed been transformed into this temple of sumo for 5 days. So from today until Sunday, the 19th, when the final actually happens. So they've got more than 40 elite wrestlers will compete in the tournament. It's the second time ever, actually, that it's been held outside of Japan by the Japan Sumo Association. And the last time was more than 30 years ago, also in London, also at the Royal Albert Hall. So the excitement is big. It's a mix of this athleticism, these centuries-old traditions. And because also, Tom, by the way, because Brits aren't used to sumo, the audience has indeed been warned about the dangers of falling wrestlers and to just avoid being squished if they're sitting too close. But yes, I did spot one sumo wrestler. He was here at the event alongside the president and CEO of Sanrio and, of course, Hello Kitty herself. So quite an exciting Wednesday here in South Kensington.
Laura, just quickly, if you had to dress up either as Hello Kitty or as a sumo wrestler and take a bit of a stroll around the centre of London town, which would you go for?
I think it might be safer, and I won't get arrested if it says Hello Kitty. I think I'll be honest.
Okay, I'll leave our global audience to ponder that one. Laura Kramer, good luck. Watch where you're sitting. Don't get squished, and we'll see you back here at Monocle HQ shortly. That was our Laura Kramer reporting from across the way, the other side of the park here in London town. And that is all we have time for on today's edition of The Briefing. The programme was produced by Hassan Anderson and by Laura Kramer. She's been busy. Our researcher was Joanna Moser. Our studio manager was Christy O'Grady. My thanks to them one and all. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow noon in London, 1300 CET. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye and thanks for tuning in.